The last Ukrainian troops remaining in the besieged port of Mariupol have defied a Russian deadline to surrender. More than 10,000 civilians have been killed in the weeks-long bombardment. Moscow estimates around 2,500 Ukrainian soldiers are holding out at a huge steel plant. Russia's defense ministry says it will destroy those who continue to resist. Ukraine's prime minister says the city has not fallen and its forces will fight to the end. Well, for more on the military situation in Ukraine, we're joined now by former military intelligence officer Frank Ledwidge, who's in Oxford in England. Hi and welcome to DW. Now, the Ukrainian forces in Mariupol have rejected an ultimatum set by Russia, with the Ukrainian Prime Minister saying they'll, quote, fight to the end in Mariupol. But what can the Ukrainian forces actually hold back the Russians?
Well, they can hold them back as long now as they survive. What they've been given, it seems to me, is a no-quarter order by their enemy, which is to say that there is little point in you surrendering because we're going to kill you anyway, which is entirely contrary to the laws of war, the laws and customs of war, and, of course, the Geneva Conventions. One of the problems of giving a no-quarter order is that you encourage your enemy to fight to the death, and it seems to me that that's the direction this is going.
Yeah, well, how strategically important, then, is Mariupol for the Russians?
OK, it's important for two major reasons. The first, that it would open the way for a land corridor between the occupied Donbass area and the equally occupied Crimea. Now, currently, the only conduit between Russia and Crimea is effectively a long bridge that they finished, I think, about 3 or 4 years ago in Kerch Straits. Now they'll have a land corridor into the Crimea. So that's the first thing. Second thing, from the perspective of the direct military situation, there are between 6 and 8 Russian battalion combat groups, which are about in theory, 1,000 men each, but of course probably significantly less now. They've been very ravaged. But those would be released, and the units supporting them probably to strike north into Ukraine, which will be a problem for Ukrainian forces. And that's one of the reasons these guys have been given the order to fight on, I suspect.
Let's talk actually a little bit more about Russia's strategy. Now, they've confirmed the death of General Vladimir Frolov, another high-ranking general who's killed in Ukraine. What does this tell us, though, about Russia's military strategy?
Well, the first thing it tells us is that they're not very good at command and control. One of the advantages that Western forces have demonstrated over the last 30 years is they give a great deal of initiative to their forward commanders. These generals who are being killed, which, by the way, constitutes about 30% of their general officers so far, it's an amazing number if we just take into account that in the 15 years or so in Vietnam, the Americans lost 6 generals. In 51 days, the Russians have lost 8 full generals. But what's happening here are two things. First, the generals are going forward to sort out mess created by the fact that there's very little initiative to be had in their lower officer orders, as it were. And the second thing is outstanding targeting by Ukrainian forces, which I suspect is being assisted by Western and NATO intelligence. One thing NATO has been very, very good at in Afghanistan and other places is high-value targeting. And these generals are high-value targets.
Frank, Russia has also lost its Black Sea flagship Moskva this week, but it also leads me on to wonder, how long can they continue to suffer losses like the ones that we've seen so far?
Credible estimates of the losses the Russians have taken are between 25 and 30% of their initial force. Problems the Russians have is that they don't have the kind of reserve system that, say, the Americans have or most Western countries have, nor do they have the depths of manpower that, say, the People's Republic of China have. So what they're trying to do now is essentially scraping the bottom of the barrel for soldiers. They have called up their very few reserves, those who've been serving or stopped serving since 2012, and they'll take a long time to get them into the front line. They're also suffering endemic problems of corruption within their ranks, which also thins things out in terms of manpower and efficiency. They're in very serious trouble, in my estimation, and that isn't necessarily entirely good news, because it raises the possibility of escalation using weapons other than standard conventional battalion combat groups.
Military expert Frank Ledwidge in Oxford in England. Thank you for joining us on DW.
Thank you, Pablo.
Well, DW correspondent Rebecca Ritters is in Kyiv for us. Hi, Rebecca, good to see you. Now, the deadline has passed. What is the latest we know from Mariupol?
That's right, Pablo. The Russians gave the Ukrainian soldiers until 1300 today local time to come out with their hands up or risk being shot, being killed. They it would appear, have ignored that order. As you're reporting, the Prime Minister saying that fighting continues. It isn't all that surprising. The Azov battalion, those Ukrainian soldiers defending the city, have said that they are going to fight till the end. They've said that all the way along since the beginning of this war, and they're famous here in Ukraine for managing to defend that city back in 2014 when Russia invaded the first time. So it's very unsurprising that they haven't heeded that warning. Now, Mariupol has been under siege for weeks, as we've been reporting, and the just true atrocities and devastation coming out of that city. The stories are truly shocking, but it is a key target for Russia, both tactically and territorially. If they are successful in taking Mariupol, it will link up areas that under their control in Crimea and the Donbass, and also really give a big knock to the Ukrainian economy, not able to use that port to export its steel and wheat and other products. So definitely a key city, both sides fighting till the end. The Ukrainians definitely outnumbered, but it isn't over yet.
Now, President Zelensky warned Russia peace talks will end if its forces kill the Ukrainian troops defending Mariupol. Has there been any reaction to that?
Well, that's right. I mean, after that directive or that ultimatum was given by Russia, Zelensky came out and said that, you know, if the Ukrainian soldiers are killed, then any peace negotiations or peace deal would die with them. But in reality, those peace talks have actually been on hold for some weeks now, ever since Russian soldiers retreated from areas around Kyiv, around here where I am. The atrocities that were found in the wake of their retrieval really put the talks on a back burner anyway. The Ukrainians and Russians not speaking to each other for several weeks, for a couple of weeks now, sorry. We were hearing rumours that Russian oligarch Roman Abramovich was in town. He's, of course, famous for being the former owner of Chelsea Football Club. He was apparently here trying to sort of revive those talks. But today the foreign minister has said that Russia and Ukraine are not talking. So definitely still on ice. Whatever happens in Mariupol will be decisive in whether or not those talks can continue.
Rebecca Ritters in Kyiv, many thanks.